hold the door, you guys, for Game of Thrones Season 6 spoilers and the return of Geek Food Friday. So if you're a fan of fantasy TV shows, books, movies, you'd better know what Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire is. And if you don't, then are you really a fantasy fan? I mean, are you? But today is the finale of the Season 6 of Game of Thrones. It has been an amazing season so far, so I wanted to go ahead and make a cake inspired by Game of Thrones. Now, for those of you who don't know, the wall is a giant ice wall that keeps some horrible things out, trying to keep it a little bit spoiler-free. And I think it's going to be relevant for today's finale. We'll see how it goes after tonight, but you know, I don't think anything good's gonna happen tonight at the wall. So, as you might see in front of me, I have already made several cakes, and I'm gonna show you how I am going to make the wall out of cake. So the first thing we're gonna do is that we are going to level our cakes. This is pretty much one of the most important parts of this entire process because we want to make sure that we have level cakes that are all the same height. Because you can pretty much think of these as the building blocks for our wall, so if we have bricks of all sorts of different sizes, it increases the chance of the cake being lopsided or falling over completely. So I've put my cake onto a cake board. I'm doing that mainly because I just want the same reference point rather than cutting it on plates, because the plates can all be different sizes. I have the same reference point for all the cakes that I'm going to be cutting, and I have my cutter set, or leveler, set to a 6, and I'm just going to go ahead and level off all of the cakes. And dispose of the tops however you may like. So, you know, you could use it for cake pops, or you know, you could do what I'm doing and just flat out eat it. Now, after leveling all your cakes, what you want to do next is that you want to cut each cake into 3 pieces. So we have a 6x6 cake, and what we're going to end up having is effectively 3 6x2 bricks that we can use in order to make our wall. So the next thing that we're going to do is that we are going to start assembling the wall. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our bricks of cake and we're going to create 3 separate wall segments, each with 4 bricks each. Now the purpose of this is to pretty much create a strong structure for each of the segments that we're then going to put all together once they've had time to chill in the fridge and strengthen up a little bit. So you want to take 2 of your pieces of cake and you just want to lay them together as close as you can. And I'm going to take some frosting and pretty much just glue the 2 pieces together using some frosting in the middle. And you can be as liberal as you want because you really just want it to act like glue and be as strong as it can be together. We're going to go ahead and take 2 more pieces of our cake. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to make what's called a crumb coating. And the purpose of that is to create just a really thin layer of frosting out on the entire outside of the cake. And it'll help glue it all a bit together after we put it in the fridge. And it'll make it to where any of the crumbs get caught when we do the additional frosting outside, and we won't get frustrated when we're trying to make it look all pretty and we're catching crumbs every which way. So as you can see, the 3 segments of the cake are all frosted and crumb coated. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in the refrigerator and let them chill for a couple of hours just so they can set and harden up a bit before the next step of assembly. So the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and create a huge freaking mess. Now I've gone ahead and melted some brown and some green candy melts for some trees and some wood that will form the fort that goes in front of the ice wall. Now here you can see a giant freaking mess of me trying to create the trunks and a really failed attempt at making a bunch of side panels for the fort.
In a minute or so, you'll see me switch to a far smarter technique that I kind of switched to halfway through, but here is the front door and front wall of the fort that's going to go in front of the ice wall. And all of this is made with candy that is pretty easy to find in any kind of craft store. Now here's a way smarter way of me doing it, even though I can't really talk. Pretty much what I did here is that I took some parchment paper that has grid lines, and I use those to pretty much create a uniform size for any kind of panels that I would use and for any kind of walls that I would use. So I went ahead and created the front facing wall was going to be, I think it was a 2x1, and the walls that connected the front of the fort to the ice wall were a 1x1 square. And I'm using the green candy melt in order to create some really janky looking trees. I mean, I guess they look okay, right? Right, they totally do. A technique that I'm using to kind of make an appearance of pine trees is that I'm pulling the candy melt back and forth in order to create that pine effect. And here's the most panic-inducing part of the cake process. I got these really great cake supporting beams from Wilton, and I am here having a panic attack trying to cut one of the support beams. Oh god, I'm getting stressed out just recording the voice back for this. But pretty much what I'm doing here is I'm trying to cut the support beams so that they can be inserted into the little pod things, so that pretty much it's the entire height of the cake that I'm trying to add the support to. And on the bottom tier, I'm adding 3 supports. The middle tier, I went ahead and I added 2. And in between each layer, I would go ahead and add some icing, just really to glue each of the pieces together so that they don't go and slide around on one another. Now, once I put all 3 cakes together, the first thing that I went ahead and did is I took some of my icing and I filled in some of the gaps between the 3 wall segments in order to make it look a little bit more like one entire piece rather than 3 segments that were just jankily put together. And I also went ahead and once I got my basic front wall structure, I went ahead and drew some lines just with my tool to make sure that there weren't any gaps in the icing, and I used this really cool Wilton tool to flatten the front of the cake. And I'm coming back with some blue icing, and I'm drawing some lines that are vertical throughout the entire front facing of the wall. And the purpose of that is that I'll come back with my straightening tool, and I'm gonna go ahead and try to pretty much marble the blue all the way out throughout the white icing. And the thing that I like about this technique is that it really kind of gives a little bit of that more icy texture and coloring that you would see with ice, rather than having just a singular one-tone white cake. With the little bit of blue swirled all throughout it, it really adds this great appearance of, a marbled ice color. And I'm just going back and I'm adding some horizontal lines, and I'm going to do the same technique. I'm really just trying to layer on some of that blue marbling throughout all the white frosting in order to really create that ice facade that I want in the frosting. And the next thing that I'm doing is I am using my cake tool to pretty much draw lines in the front of the wall. Now, the wall isn't really this perfect structure. It looks like somebody's, added all these bricks and that it's aged throughout the years. So I was trying to use my tool in order to really bring some of that additional texture out. And what you'll see next is that I really dig my tool into the frosting and I pull it down in order to make this appearance of, water pouring off the wall and freezing pretty, quickly. And pretty much once we've got the wall together, we're just going to go ahead and take all of the chocolate pieces of the fort and we're going to assemble them all together. I just use some simple frosting in order to glue all the pieces together. It holds it pretty well together. And Then I use some paper straws once I put the fort together I pretty much just push them against the ice wall, and I use those as my simulation for the elevator that goes up and down the wall. Once I've got my fort together and I've got the elevator together, I go ahead and just use some more of the chocolate in order to put a path out in front of the fort, and then I use some additional frosting to pour down some snow over the surface since it is in the north and there is a lot of snow in the area. But then we go ahead and put some of the trees that we created and we just kind of glue those down onto the ice wall arena in order to create a forest, and then sprinkle some powdered sugar on top to have a really great appearance.
And there you have it, the wall from Game of Thrones. This probably took about, I would probably say 6 hours from the moment that I started baking the cakes until now, where we have the finished product. And that's our wall cake. It is a pretty intense 6-layer tier cake that I'm really impressed is still standing. I thought that there would be all sorts of horrible things that would go on, because well, that was fun when it lasted.